Welcome to the MusicNut program. I am John the Music Nut. Thank you for joining me today. Now, this weekend they were calling for rain. There wasn't anything we could do outside. It reminded me of something. It's the 55th anniversary of the original Woodstock Festival, the 3 days of peace, love, and music, which was held in Bethel, New York, on Maxie Oscar's farm. So I thought, what a better time than now? What would be a better time than to talk about my five favorite bands that played the original Woodstock Festival, August 15 through 18 in 1969. So I really got interested in the music that was played at that festival in 1989. During the 20th anniversary of the festival, MTV was playing the documentary that whole weekend. And they were putting disclaimers about how they didn't promote drug use and all that. And right before I watched that documentary on MTV and then taped it, which I don't have the VHS tapes anymore, I bought the soundtrack from RCA Music, later BMG Music. And this was I believe, a 3-record set when it came out. And it was released on 2 cassettes. And I really absorbed this music at the time as an 18-year-old. Not long after that, I bought Woodstock 2, which was more performances from the festival. A lot of the bands that play at that festival made up the foundation of the music that I love to this very day. So I thought, let's talk about my 5 favorite bands that played the festival. So without further ado, here we go. Actually, let me give a plug. This shirt I'm wearing was made by the Mock Chunk Opera House. Now, they're in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. They're a live venue, and it's a fantastic venue as far as the acoustics, the staff, the music they bring in. Their volunteers are the best. And I'm not just saying that because some of them have become my friends over the years. Wonderful place to see a show, and they put out these t-shirts every now and then, and they're always based on a theme. So for the 50th anniversary, they put out this t-shirt, and they wear well, and they're reasonable, $22 to $25 a piece. I've had this shirt for 5 years. Wears like iron. So I just want to give a shout out to the Mock Chunk Opera House and their merch. 3 days of peace, love, and music. Woodstock. This is the director's cut. I bought this 20 years ago. That's the DVD. Top 5 bands. My favorite 5 bands, not the top 5. My favorite. Number 5, Jefferson Airplane. Now, volunteers would come out a few months after the festival, but they were playing songs from this album at the festival. They came on Sunday morning. As Grace Slick would say, this is morning maniac music, and they opened with volunteers. They played a very strong set, a 1 hour and 40-minute set, while people who were waking up from all the great music from the previous 2 days. Their music is really left a strong impact and given me a lot of joy over the years. And they're my number 5. Number 4, we're going to go more old school here with the cassettes. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Now, at this time, this was the self-titled debut. Neil Young also played the festival with him, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, but he's not shown on the documentary, although he does have a song with CSN&Y called Sea of Madness on. So they're promoting this album. Marrakesh Express was already the single, and the highlight by this band when they played the festival was Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. That's the song they're most known for at the festival. Stephen Stills' love song to Judy Collins would be released as a single a month later, and it would become one of their biggest and most enduring songs. This is a classic album. I would say their first three. This one, Deja Vu with Neil Young, and then CSN, which came out in 1977 with the original trio. They're all magnificent. And this is my number 4 favorite band that played Woodstock. Number 3. Now, you wouldn't really know this band played Woodstock. They weren't part of the documentary. They weren't part of the soundtrack. Their leader and main songwriter said, the performance isn't up to par, so we're not going to be part of this. But later on, when they put out the 4-disc version of this festival, and I got to give a shout out to my good friend Wayne Drager for recording that for me. They did play a few performances. They had their performances on the box set. Well, I'm talking about Creedence Clearwater Revival. How many songwriters had a better run than John Fogerty had from 1967 through 1970 or maybe 71? He was on fire. At this point, Green River had just come out. It was their second of 3 albums in 1969. Think about that. And they were all magnificent albums. Green River was the single at that time, and Commotion was the B-side. One of the heaviest songs, too heavy for 69, if you really think about it, but a magnificent tune, very memorable, as was Green River. So they played this festival. And again, like I said, John didn't think the performances were up to par, but if you listen to their performances on the 4-disc set, they were good. I'm not going to say they were the highlights. They weren't as great as some of the other performances I'm going to talk about. But I love CCR's music. I've loved it for decades. Strong part of my foundation, and that's my number 3. Number 2, this is another band you'd be surprised at first if you're just a casual listener or fan that they played Woodstock, because they also weren't part of the documentary and they're not part of the soundtrack as well. But that 4-disc version that came out as a box set gave you some performances from it. And I'm talking about the band. Now, the band were about to promote this album. I think it just came out right around this time. This is their second album, the self-titled album. It's also called the Brown Album. Over time, it's probably become their most famous album because The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down is on here, as well as Rag Mama Rag. A lot of great songs on here. Cross the Great Divide. Up on Cripple Creek was a big hit too. This is probably their biggest seller. I can tell you straight out, their first 3 albums are 10s. It all just depends on what you like. And their next albums, Cahoots and Northern Lights, Southern Cross, respectively, they're excellent albums as well. Now, this is the version that came out in 2019. It's a 2 CD version, and I highly recommend to get this because the second disc has their performance from Woodstock, original rough mixes. And they have Chest Fever, Tears of Rage, Long Black Veil, This Wheel's on Fire, The Weight's on here, their most enduring song. How many bands have I seen perform that live? Loving You Is Sweeter Than Ever. All of the bonus tracks are pretty top-notch as well. Number 2 favorite band for me that played Woodstock is the band. And my number 1 was always going to be my number 1. It would have been my number 1 in 1989. And it's my number 1 as a 53-year-old man in 2024. And this is the album that had just come out at that time. Santana. This is their self-titled debut. This is the 30th anniversary edition. I believe this came out in 1998, but they called it the 30th anniversary edition. Evil Ways was the single, and it hit top 10. Their performance, spectacular. Soul Sacrifice was a big highlight of the soundtrack and the documentary. It's an instrumental that you hear to this day. They still play this live. They still play Evil Ways live too. This is a fantastic album. I would argue their first 7 albums, I would put them on the same level as your top bands that get more notoriety, more popularity. The first 7 albums, Santana's debut right through Amigos in 1976. Amazing. When they went jazz fusion on Caravanserai and Welcome, I liked them even more. This whole album's awesome. You got a lot of great instrumentals, but Persuasion's fantastic. You Just Don't Care is fantastic. Shades of Time is awesome. Greg Raleigh was singing with him. I loved Greg Raleigh as a vocalist in Santana as well as Journey. Cannot recommend this album highly enough. I know Abraxas is the bigger album because that had Black Magic Woman, Gypsy Queen, and Oi Como Va on it. This is just as strong. Excellent. And they are my favorite band that played at Woodstock. Let's give you a few honorable mentions. I could tell you that if I was 23 and doing this video, my number 1 would be Santana. My number 2 would be Jimi Hendrix. I'm not into his music quite as much as I used to. Maybe I'm just a little Hendrixed out at this point. I have a lot of his albums. I do have his 2-disc version. I believe it's 2-disc version of when he played at Woodstock. Now I think about it, I think it was just 1 disc. But he did an excellent set to close the festival at Woodstock. And this is Electric Ladyland. This came out a year before. And by this point, he was really going to different directions with his music. And he would go into even deeper directions by the time he played at the festival. Again, Jimi Hendrix's performance was magnificent. A lot of people remember that his version of the Star Spangled Banner at the festival, which was awesome. So there's an honorable mention. Another honorable mention, this band really kicked ass at the festival. The Who. This is Tommy. Tommy came out during this time, and they played a lot of songs from Tommy. Again, they're kind of in the Jimi Hendrix category with me. They're a band I used to love more back in the day, and now I still really like them. I still love Tommy. I actually like the albums before Tommy even more these days, but they put on a fantastic performance there with See Me, Feel Me. So many great songs that they played. Their version of Summertime Blues, excellent. One more I'd like to talk about is Mountain. Now, this is Leslie West's solo album, his debut solo album called Mountain, because Mountain did not put out an album yet. But they did play songs like Blood of the Sun and Southbound Train at the festival, and they kicked ass. Excellent. Excellent performance by the band. The song that a lot of people know, Mississippi Queen, that came out under Mountain's debut, Climbing. That would not come out till 1970. So that wasn't part of their set at the festival. But I did have to give them a shout out because they did a magnificent job. And there were a lot of memorable sets at the festival. Canned Heat were fantastic. Sly and the Family Stone were amazing. Arlo Guthrie was great. Richie Havens was great. The list goes on and on. Joe Cocker was great. So there's my 5 favorite bands that played the original Woodstock Festival in 1969. The land where the band performed on, which was Max Yasgur's farm, is now the Bethel Wood Center for the Arts. And they put on concerts there. They have a magnificent museum that I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already. I haven't been there since 2013. These days, it's $20 to go into the festival. If you get a ticket in advance, it's a little higher if you go to the door. On the nights they have shows, it's $10 in advance, $12 at the door. And here's a little koozie for you that you could pick up. You could pick up a lot of Woodstock merchandise up at the Bethel Wood Center for the Arts. Fantastic live. It's in my opinion, the best place to see a show if you want to see an outdoor show. So what did you think of the Woodstock Festival? Were you at the Woodstock Festival? What do you think of the bands that played there? Do you like a lot of these bands? Do you think that there were better bands that put on better performances, just have better catalogs of music? Please put it in the comments. Thank you for joining me today. Do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.